It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey everybody, Scott Luton with Supply Chain Now Radio. Welcome back to the show. You can probably hear the buzz in the room. We aren't broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia today, but rather we're here in Austin, Texas, home of EFT's Logistics CIO Forum, which is now a Reuters event. We've been interviewing some of the most innovative thought leaders that are doing big things across the end-to-end supply chain industry. And our team, our Supply Chain Now Radio team, is proud to continue to partner with Nick Asif, the EFT, the Reuters event team. It's been a great experience through our second event here. So let's welcome in my fearless co-host here today, Greg White, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur, chronic disruptor, and trusted advisor. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's so far we've had a few interviews, and all of them have been great. I can't wait to get these out to the people.
I think we're going to continue that streak.
Going on.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue that streak here today.
We'll find out. No pressure.
No pressure. No, I think we're in good hands. Let's welcome in our featured guest for this segment, Abhishek Gupta, Group Product Manager with KeepTruckin. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing fantastic. And I think this comes on the heels of your keynote earlier. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you for having me here today. Just finished the keynote about how KeepTruckin is using data to help fleets of all sizes solve some of the major pain points. But pretty exciting. This is my first time at the CIO Forum. Not the first time in Austin. Been here many times. I actually used to live here.
Oh, really?
Great. But yeah, first time at the forum. So
we're going to get some restaurant references from you then.
Torchy's, that's the place
to
go.
Is that the place to go? Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Let's write that down.
So you just came fresh off your keynote. Now you're here with us. So you're going to probably want to eat lunch with a microphone in front of you. It seems like, right?
Well,
you're going to forget how to live without one.
Yeah, I'm pretty annoyed I just brought up Torchy's because that's not all I'm thinking about.
That's good.
So we're going to dive into a lot of things, a lot of really neat things that you are doing at KeepTruckin. But before we do that, our listeners always appreciate the opportunity to kind of get a sense who they're hearing from, right? Yep. And we've got the best job in the world because we have this wide slew of the thought leaders from all aspects of the end supply chain to sit down beside us and we learn from. So let's talk a little about yourself, your professional journey, where you're from, what you did before your role at KeepTruckin.
Sure.
Tell us more.
Absolutely. So I can talk a little bit about sort of what led me here today.
Yeah.
So I actually, grew up in India and moved to Texas and then moved to California. And I think, I've been in California for most of my life after that. But one thing I really noticed was just the stark differences when you go from a place, like India, where you basically travel, 5 miles in 1 hour, and you come to a place like Texas where you're traveling 50 miles in 1 hour. And the differences I just realized thinking about, when I first moved here was just immense, especially when it relates to, transportation.
Good point.
But I think for me, I've always really been really deeply interested in transportation because, I have a deep interest in technology as well. And transportation is one of those things that has really actually been one of the first places where you see technology, right? You can think of this all the way back to the wheel, right? You can think about this to the engine, the steamboat engine, the railroad, vehicles, airplanes. I think it's one of the most interesting places where you, as a consumer, you see the application of technology. And so I've spent a lot of time kind of reading the various histories on all of these things, but that's what I've always found fascinating about these two things because they're really at the intersection, but that intersection is what's really transformed, our many industries, right? And so if you think about it, 100 years ago, everyone was talking about Standard Oil, but if you didn't have a way to move oil from the field to that, that lamp that someone had at home, how would they actually, make lamps that would work, right? So for me, I've always really been interested in that, really always been fascinated. And so actually before KeepTruckin, I was working at Uber and, the probably the poster child of transportation technology. But I was there the last 4 years. So I started KeepTruckin just recently.
Please.
But at Uber, I think this is probably where I saw the best convergence, right? Because there, what I really got to focus on was really more how do you build technology platforms that enable sort of some of the things that consumers would see, and this was really things such as how do we use data more effectively? How do we build kind of the right kind of platforms that help you make better decisions around supply or demand? Things like how do we use our data and share more effectively with third parties such as governments, where they can actually use this for really interesting things like city planning. I also worked in our self-driving space as a part of Uber for a couple of years there, so I really got to see sort of the inside of that industry, especially as it was just taking off in the last few years. And so I think there's obviously a lot that needs to happen there, but I think you can start seeing sort of the convergence of all these different technologies coming together. So for me, kind of working at KeepTruckin, I felt was very natural, just because it's something that transportation is something I've always been interested in, and you're always acutely aware of it as a consumer. But then I think getting to work on the technology side at Uber, I think really set me up for kind of going deeper into this. And so that's what I'm generally pretty excited about is just what's possible with that.
Yeah, the art of the possibility, right? Or the art of the possible. So what brings you here besides your keynote? When you saw this event? I mean, time is clearly extremely valuable. What brought you here? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, so again, very, very excited and very appreciative to be invited as a speaker here. But I think this is a really good convergence of sort of the IT side, the technology side, the logistics space, and as I mentioned, I mean technology and transportation go hand in hand. So these mobile devices have really been kind of transforming what we've been doing. So for me, I really wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what KeepTruckin's vision is when it comes to this space. We're a fleet management solution, but what I want to talk a little bit about was specifically how is data within this industry kind of transforming the industry, but also how can we actually use it to build sort of real solutions that are impacting businesses. I mean, so my focus there at KeepTruckin is really around kind of leading our safety products. This is things like cameras, and this is things like how do we help fleets and drivers be safer on the road. But a lot of that is powered through data, right? And data doesn't just mean information collected from a driver. It can mean things like images that we collect from the cameras that we have installed. It can mean third-party information such as environmental factors. All of these kind of things help us understand how to keep fleets safer. And I think we can apply this to a few other things too. Fuel, things like dwell times, which I'm sure you hear a lot about.
We hear a lot about that lately.
One. So I think for us, really talking about how we're using data to sort of add value for businesses and for our customers is really what I wanted to discuss today, because I think we're just at the sort of the tipping point on where that is and where we're getting started.
So before we go there, let's for the three people that may have never heard of KeepTruckin, I know y'all have really made some waves. Tell us in a nutshell, what does the company do?
Sure. So KeepTruckin, our mission is, to bring the world's trucks online and automate freight. And what we mean by that is we kind of focus on two really key things we want to be able to provide for customers. It's how do we help you save costs, and how do we help you grow your business? And we do that through a fleet management solution and a freight solution. And I think for us, I think we're kind of at this intersection where we get to look at customers of all sizes, whether they're small owner operator to fleets with 1,000+ trucks, regardless of what kind of space or industry or location they're in. So for me, I think that's an exciting place to be, just because it's we're looking at both sides, right? We're not just about how do we help you save money, but also how do we help you grow your business? Because I think at the end of the day, it's a very margin intensive industry. So the more we can do to impact both sides, I think is something that our customers really appreciate.
Now, your role as group product manager, where do you spend your time?
It's a good question. I mean, so really what that entails is thinking about and sort of defining what our product is going to be in the space, right? What is our sort of strategy, what is our vision, what is our roadmap in addressing some of the problems that we hear from customers. And I think, for customers, from that standpoint, it's really about spending a lot of time with customers, understanding their pain points, and then articulating it into a value add solution that, at the end of the day, really solves that problem. I think that's the goal of being in product management. But I think the really interesting thing is I get to work a lot with everyone on our technology side, not just obviously engineering, but also our data science group, our design teams. And I think that's what I find always exciting is building products. It's a team sport, and getting the right people involved on the technology side, along with our sales and account management teams. I think that's really where you get the best sort of convergence of ideas and solutions in a way that's adding value for customers.
And the firm is based in San Francisco?
Yeah, we're based in San Francisco, but obviously global offices, and we've been around for about 6 years.
Okay. So let's dive more into clearly. I love the passion when you talk about how data is really revolutionizing the industry. Clearly, you're speaking from a position of passion. So let's dive headfirst into that. Where do you see, from a transportation standpoint, not just some of the changes, but really speaking about the changes that data is enabling?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think you can take it in many different directions. I think one thing to think about is, transportation is really about a couple of things, right? It's about moving people and it's about moving things. And I think, if you go back hundreds of years or whether you go back the last 5 years, when you look at transportation from those two angles, you can see data is kind of really impacting both of them, right? I think, for example, with data, what we really talk about is not just data that you're collecting, but it's really the convergence of, your mobile device. It's, the internet. It's the cloud. It's the hardware solutions that we're creating. It's a convergence of data collected from all of these things that are impacting, transportation. And then I think you can start getting into really the interesting side, right? So, if you think about it, data has the ability to kind of transform not a variety of use cases and build actually a variety of new use cases. So for example, you can think about, with better data, you can see better marketplaces, right? More efficient marketplaces. This can be across freight. This can be across, what we were doing. I was doing my previous role at Uber in ride sharing. This means you can do better pricing, better forecasting, better supply chain, better matching. It can be done in real time. Then there's other aspects of this, which is, well, now that I have all this data, how can I use this to optimize my business, right? How can I use this to better manage my business, save costs? That's where you start getting into the other aspects, like things like, well, how can we improve safety? How can we, use this to improve the costs on the other things we see on the balance sheet, whether it's insurance, whether it's fuel or maintenance.
Touches everything.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just better general management, right? Because at the end of the day, what you're using is just measuring and managing your business much more effectively. I think the other sort of really other interesting thing is we think about consumer experiences, right? I think now, when you look at the value of data, that means, it's not just about consumer experiences that exist in consumer products like Uber, but also you can apply the same things to things like trucking. For example, you can do smarter onboarding, you can do better hiring, you can do better training, you can do things more intelligently and more effectively. I think from a consumer standpoint and kind of some of these applications, the interesting thing is it actually also transforms kind of how you sort of where you live and how you live, right? So for example, we talked a lot about, better data. What if there's better data that you can now use to reduce congestion in cities, transform how cities work? I was reading an article a week ago, I think, on the New York Times about freight and delivery in New York City and how it's causing
mayhem,
a ton of problems, right? And so it really we usually start wondering, well, could data help me decide how to store things more effectively? Could it help me sort of decide how to do better last mile delivery? Can it help me sort of determine depending on where I store and the route I take, how do I, do a batching of multiple sort of deliveries all at once? And I think those are kind of questions that kind of need to be answered now is, we've got this vast treasure trove of data of how people move, how things get delivered. Everyone, you can build these great consumer experiences, but then that also means there's a lot of implications on the world, right? We talk a lot about, freight movement, but like even what you see in things like micromobility in cities, right? Like here in Austin, I saw a ton of scooters everywhere.
Right.
And, what happens when you've got scooters and bikes, and do we need to create more lanes for these? How does taxing change? And so lots of things I think then can happen from there. I think another kind of interesting couple of things you realize is how much data privacy plays a bigger role. Right?
On that note, have you all seen one of Apple's latest commercials? And I can't remember the exact imagery, but it zooms in from kind of a wide shot of a city, and it zooms into someone using their iPhone at home, and then it moves to a graphic where it shows kind of a lock, on the phone,
right?
And then it makes a big. I mean, you don't hear about the technology, you don't hear about any of the great things that make great Apple products. It's all about the security and locking up that user's information. And
right.
It was. I think it's the first ad I can think about that is security first here for a product like that. At least.
You're right, and I think we didn't used to talk about it that much,
right?
But it's becoming relevant and much more important, right? Because it can really impact consumers.
Right.
But I think a lot of governments now are realizing, that data privacy is something that they have to determine how to regulate. Right? Transportation in general has been regulated for a long time, right?
Yeah.
You're familiar with us and how we started with the compliance mandate, but regulation exists, whether it's federal aviation, whether it's traffic policies or traffic laws, and so data now will play even a bigger role in sort of helping governments decide how do we regulate this. What's shareable data? What's privacy-centric data? I think for us, it's important to keep that that privacy in mind of the consumer and of the end user, but at the same time, new regulation will really dictate sort of what's the value of data at that standpoint. And then of course there's the favorite topic I think from everyone, which is automation. Right. Better data means better automation. Everything from robotics to self-driving. I think from my previous experience working within self-driving, I think there's a ton of opportunity there. Lots of room to transform. Everything from safety to sort of how we think about getting from point A to point B. Automation in the trucking space, how are warehouses loaded, unloaded. I think there's still a lot of room, lots of work that needs to happen there. So I think there's still quite a long way to go. But I think you start looking at all these things and you start getting pretty excited. Just because data is just one aspect, right? But it's kind of touching upon all of these kind of various areas. And I think the interesting thing is it's going to start touching infrastructure. It'll start touching highways. It'll start touching sort of lanes within cities, right? How do you sort of dictate what goes where? So, I see data as just being one of those new enablers when it comes to transportation, just because everyone is going to be impacted from it. Yep. Just like the same way we were impacted when, we talked about earlier about, trucks or cars 100 years ago or, railroads. I think it's going to be the same thing going forward the next 50 to 100 years.
What's funny is 12 years ago or so, I'd set up a lot of dinner meetings for an organization called Apex, which is now part of the ASCM family. And month in and month out, you could almost rely on hearing one phrase every single time. Big data, this cliche. All these companies are spending money to collect all this data, but then what are they doing with it, right?
Yeah.
You heard that all the time. That is not a problem anymore. Companies have really cracked the code of how to use this wide accumulate this wealth of data, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to your point earlier about what Apple is saying, which is we keep data privacy in mind. I think they're still smart about how they're using data, right? You can see the differences in the experiences and the products they're creating, but I think you have to keep both in mind.
Right.
I think consumers, everyone needs to understand that that's what's important is we're not just collecting and using your data, but we're using it in smart ways and value add ways while ensuring the right kind of security on top of it. And I think You brought up the point earlier about kind of what are companies doing with data, what are things they're collecting. I think the direction, the way we're trending now, it's ubiquitous. So I'm not sort of surprised that whenever it was like 10 years, right? You were
12 years ago.
Yeah, they were saying that
3 kids ago for me.
In fact, no one even mentions big data anymore.
Right.
Like
I was thinking about that.
Yeah,
in the last few weeks.
It's the least commonly used term, which I think back then it was like all the rage. Now it's of course AI, everything.
Blockchain.
That's the new
IoT.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think you have to go a little bit deeper than that to really see what are the things that are actually being transformed.
Yeah.
That's what I get excited about. Is like I think the convergence of technology and transportation has been going on for a long time. I think you move forward. I think you're feeling it right with deliveries. You're feeling it with you can get groceries delivered under an hour now. You can you see trucks having all this technology inside of them. You see scooters that are moving towards self-driving scooters at some point. So I think it's going to touch us all, and I think that's what I get excited about, and that's what I want to. That's why I came to this, this company from my previous experience, but also where I think I want to stay moving forward.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, since you have kind of your finger on the pulse of data and how it's being used today, and you talk to so many people about it, what do you think? What have you seen that is the most impactful, enlightening, or interesting? Use of data in your world, your corner of the world today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, there's, I think the interesting thing about data you were saying earlier is like a lot of it's being collected. I think the use cases for it is immense. And I think that's one of the things we kind of realize is we might do a little bit, but then someone else has, a bunch of other great ideas. I think, some things that I see really standing out now, I think, with the way I see, for example, insurance playing out, right? I think insurance now is more consistently being based on data, right? It's on your per mile basis. It's based on your behavior, right? It's not just, trucking industry, but also consumers who can see this. You can see this not just in automobile insurance. You can see this in home insurance. You can see this in sort of personal insurance. You can see health kind of moving in that direction too. So I think it's interesting because that's one of those things that you're always going to pay for, but you can actually optimize it much more effectively through the use of better data. I think we do things where we're running computer vision on top of the images and videos we collect from our cameras to help fleets understand how to be safer on the road, right? Which is
a big deal. That is a big deal. It's good. It's great for the fleets. It's great for the companies, and it's great for the consumers that have never been in a truck but want safe. I mean, in Atlanta, think about all the highways and byways. You want to, however we can make that a safer journey. It benefits everybody.
Exactly. So I think the information we collect from that's also data, right? That's also information around someone tailgating someone too long, or if you ever seen those stickers on the back of a truck call, if you can read this, that's the kind of thing you want to avoid, right? And so I think we want to make sure that we're capturing that information to make our customers safer on the road as well. So I think when you go back to kind of like where are some of those big impactful use cases, I think there's a lot. I would say the ones I and I'm interfacing a lot with is typically on the safety and insurance side, but I think it goes much beyond that. I think it goes much beyond that into even beyond transportation at that point. I think interesting is how other industries start converging, right? You always see real estate and transportation converge through the use of data, right? Where housing goes is highly dependent on where transportation options are, and so you can see data impacting sort of the decisions being made on things like that. So I think that's something we really think about a lot in California at this point. So I think it's those areas that I can see kind of around the horizon that where the use cases are a little bit more impactful.
Yeah, that's good.
And interesting, we've all seen some of the news where some of these large companies have new clearances to use drones, right, to deliver goods, and it'd be that is such a fascinating topic, and to see how the spillover effect, right, for all other aspects of transportation. So we'll have to bring you back on the show. As because changes in supply chain is minute by minute. It's not hour by hour.
Especially when you talk about data, because our ability Look, actuarial science for insurance, that's not a new thing.
Yeah.
But our ability to collect more and more data that provides more and more insights,
process it quicker,
and to use technology to process the actuarial tables more quickly. That's game changing for these insurance carriers.
Yeah,
right?
Agreed.
Exactly.
All right, so how can folks learn more? How can they connect with you and also learn more about KeepTruckin?
Absolutely. So I think, to connect with me, you can always, pretty active on the internet. You can always find us on Twitter or social media. But I think to learn more about KeepTruckin, you can always go to KeepTruckin.com. We're also very active, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We love to sort of connect with our customers through the comments or responses. Like I said, we have customers ranging from small owner operators to large fleets. You can see we'll respond back to you on YouTube comments. You can find YouTube videos.
Outstanding.
But yeah, feel free to reach out to us, and we're very active and very available.
And that's KeepTruckin.com,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
KeepTruckin.com. Well, this has been I feel like we've just scratched the surface with you. I admire kind of where you approach this conversation from. Data and technology in general, you can quickly get above my pay grade at least. But I like how you take a practical approach, an everyday life approach. Is kind of what I hear a lot of your commentary.
Yeah, and I think that's what matters, right? Because transportation is one of those things that you use every day, right? Whether it's to move something or it's to move yourself. So the use cases have to be practical. They have to be something that impact you on a day-to-day basis. That's what makes things like drones, as you talked about. We saw earlier in the event how they're delivering prescriptions with drones now.
Right.
That's awesome, right? That's what you want, because demographic patterns will change, but the need for prescriptions will continue going up,
especially in contingencies, and especially in rural environments. We already are in a transformational phase where a lot more folks are going to get help a lot more quickly.
Yep.
So, all right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. We're going to have the folks from KeepTruckin back on soon. Abhishek Gupta, Group Product Manager with KeepTruckin. Thanks again for your time, and I look forward to getting feedback on your keynote this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me so much here.
You bet. All right, so to our listeners, stay tuned as we continue our coverage of the EFT Logistics CIO Forum, which is now a Reuters event. And be sure to check out other upcoming events, replays of our interviews, other resources at supplychainnowradio.com. Again, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, all the leading sites where podcasts can be found. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. On behalf of the entire Supply Chain Now Radio team, Scott Luton, Greg White, wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and we will see you next time on Supply Chain Now Radio. Thanks, everybody.